Welcome one more day to Enharmonia, a space to remember ourselves deeper in the tissue of life, the tree of lives, which contains many seeds of life that must flourish fully, without limitations of love, limitations of light, consciousness, and serenity, qualities which are obstructed because we are not living the true life. We are deceived by many false beliefs, ideas that fragment everything, that separate ourselves from our own experience. We are full of fear, and this is not normal. This is a pathological state which is reinforced by education in universities, in schools, in dysfunctional families, or even in families that don't seem to have big issues, but still perpetuate many ideas which are not in tune with true reality. Therefore, we have to get rid of all the false personalities and beliefs that condition us. This is a question that fascinated me since 1997 when I started to study the subject, and it took many years of inner work and self-discovery to see that even in the process of growing there can be deceptions. And today I'm going to make a summary of things I have been saying in the Spanish videos. You may have noticed I didn't publish the English versions of the Spanish videos, and this was because I was loaded with work and I was answering questions of people from the Spanish-speaking world. But I'm going to make a summary today so you have an overview, and I will be connecting all that to certain accidents that took place in the past, the origin of the moon, and how humanity in an animal state was somehow modified with the trance state humanity is living. Humans are under hypnosis, and this is not normal. This is basically due to certain modifications that took place in the past, and in principle they obeyed management of energy and certain catastrophes that were the result of a previous chaotic system. I have already spoken about this because you may have heard about the fallen architects, but today you will see more important connections. I didn't show everything at once. I have to leave crumbs on the way so people pick them up and get to their own conclusions. I don't want automatons. I'm not a dogmatic person, so realize this is the result of digestion. So little by little I give what I have experienced. I'm not teaching anything of which I'm not convinced, and it's very important to speak from the own experience. So to begin with, I will be repeating the answer I gave to a person from Spain who asked me if I use hypnotherapy in my guiding sessions, my counseling approaches. And I don't use those methods because the way we access the unconscious is by means of self-discovery, feeling a deeper self-awareness, understanding the blockages that we have in the mind, the heart, the physical responses we have acquired over the years because of certain fears or habits that we acquire. It's more important for me to become aware of our full conditioning that simply getting into a state of relaxation and remember things that happened in the past. It can be useful sometimes if there is a deep trauma, but memories come naturally on their own when we know ourselves deeper. So we even get a more natural way of accessing that which is apparently hidden, even though our true being is aware of everything. We must realize there is something in us which is not conditioned. And this is what is known as the body of the Messiah, the being of original light. Is an intelligence that has pure conscience, knows exactly what we have to do, what is the way of healing, and is also self-conscious because it acknowledges that such light is emanated from the Infinite One. So in that light we recognize ourselves as divine sons as well. This is very important, because if you admit you are not the son of this fallen world, then you can have the privileges of true reality, the one in which there is no death, there is no suffering, there is no deception, and there is so much love that we have the ability to come here, to this world of imperfection and deception, and bring back beings to the tree of life. So we are needed when we become aware of this light. We are not servants of any lord in the heavens. Those things which have been preached in religion have conditioned people to think they are separate from the divine. And that's not what the Master, Messiah, taught. He said, I am the true vine and you are the branches. I am the light of the cosmos and you are the light of the cosmos. This is even in the Gospels. And we have to understand this in relation to the spheres of the tree of life. It's amazing. We can also heal certain traumas by accessing the different energy centers in ourselves, which are sealed. There are negative energies which are blocking the flow of life through us. So to have an overview, let's remember that the complete tree of life has certain aspects, or main certain aspects, that are not usually present in conventional Sefirotic representations, which only show 10. And the three missing aspects are the unity of our divine personality, the infinite will, and the light, consciousness, conscience. Those three aspects harmonized all the Sephirotic tree in ourselves, which is fallen. We have spheres that come from a divine world, but they are darkened. And those Sefirot, or spheres, are known in several traditions, but we have to bring back the full tree so we can access healing, so we can put the crown of life. That's usually the first sphere, Sephirah, the crown, but most people don't assume they must put on the crown of life. They must govern their mind, their heart, their emotions, their physical body, because they have a light that comes from the Infinite One, the Holy One. And therefore, the core of our being is the Holy One. In Hebrew, for instance, the Holy One was known as Ain, nothing, because it's nothing we can think in terms of conventional theology or philosophy. It's a wholeness which is so full of love and light that you cannot say is this or is that, because it's all that at the same time. And the word Ain has a very interesting origin. If you go to Exodus 17, you will see how the Israelites are complaining because they are thirsty, they don't have water, and they have just come out of Egypt, but they are in the desert, and desperate because they think the divine is not with them. And it comes a point right at the end of that chapter 17 in which the Israelites say, is the divine verb Yud-Heh with us or not? That not is Ain. So it was used by Kabbalists as a reference to the apparent absence of the Holy One. There was no absence, but the Israelites were not aware of the Holy One. Maybe they thought they were looking for an entity God which helped them get out of Egypt. But this is the mistake. The Tetragrammaton, the Yud-Heh is an existential verb or name which makes reference to that which makes things come into existence. But it depends on how you understand that process of coming into being. If you feel lacking, then you will make the lack real. If you feel weak and say, I am weak, then you will make that real. If you say, I am a mortal being subject to the forces of this fallen world, then you are a slave. You are subject to the forces of existence. But if you realize you are the loving light of the infinite Holy One, then things change, because you have the crown on your head. You are part of the tissue of self-conscious life. This is why the second aspect was known as Ein Sof, without limits. This is the aspect of will. There is something in us which is more than a wish or a desire. Will is a force that can overcome anything, even the worst circumstances. We are in a very dangerous world because the threats are almost constant, and here we are. Some of us have overcome traumas, threats, diseases, states of despair, sorrow, and we go on because there is something in us that keeps us moving, the will to live. This is very important, and this is contained in the infinite light, Ein Sof Aur, the light without limits. Those aspects are usually placed on top of the tree of life, but they are an integral part of the tree of life. This is the mistake in Jewish traditional Kabbalah, because they don't assume that light in their own. They are still waiting for a Messiah. The Messiah didn't come. Some Kabbalists admit that the one they call Yeshua was the Messiah, but they don't assume it fully. Maybe they are afraid of denying something their sages have said. Anyway, it has come the time to remember that the Messiah came as the head of a collective body, and therefore the universal I, which is the Ain, the true self, the true will and the true light, is within ourselves and can connect all the paths of the Sefirotic tree, cleansing everything, bringing us healing. So this is what gives us the crown of life. We assume the direction, mastery of our life with wisdom and understanding, Chokmah and Bina. Those are the following two spheres in the tree of life. And notice how there is a connection between the so-called crown of life and the top chakra in the energy configuration. In a sense, we can say the chakras are an aspect of the Sefirotic tree in our energy body and also in our physical body, because our crown our physical crown is somehow the spot where we can connect with something. Actually, in ancient times, we had a sort of appendix that protruded over the head, and it was like an organ of perception, the third eye. And over the time, it got atrophied, and now it's closed. The place is known as fontanella. Even the babies have a sort of hole, the fontanella, which used to be the place for this organ of perception, which is the third eye. This third eye was connected to the crown. So here we see the full connection between Chokmah and Binah, wisdom and understanding, which correspond with the third eye, and also Keter, the crown. Now, notice how wisdom and understanding can be obscured. We don't usually have proper wisdom and proper understanding. We can know many things intuitively or intellectually, but we don't understand them in our own experience of life. So true understanding involves being in life, knowing how the seed of wisdom develops in many different ways. You can have the intuition of what love is, but if you don't express that love with your friends, your fellows, your parents, if you don't express that love in forgiveness, in waiting, in patience, you don't understand all the qualities of love. Understanding implies a multiplicity of relations. And in order to understand, you also need to increase the level of being. Knowing and being must go hand in hand, so there can be understanding. This was explained by Mr. Gurdjieff, a teacher of dances that brought very complete wisdom and understanding about all this. In the 20th century, I learned many things from him, and I work with people that also studied him. And somehow this gave me a greater view to understand many of the things taught in Hebrew wisdom, which is not so much different from the teaching of the Armenian master, but there are different ways of expressing it. Hebrew wisdom uses the Sephirotic tree, and the Armenian teacher used the Enneagram, which has 9 points around a circle. And I actually prove there is a connection between the Enneagram and the Sephirotic tree. It's actually the same configuration, but the Enneagram is a dynamic symbol, and we cannot understand it on a paper. Even the Sefirot tree is a dynamic symbol. You have to understand it in yourself. This is why I'm making the correlation now. And going back to the Sefirot and the energy centers, realize that between Chokmah and Binah, wisdom and understanding, there is a sphere usually known as Dat, which means knowledge or data. But this is not what we imply when we say we have understanding and wisdom, because wisdom and understanding implies self-consciousness and conscience, which is a quality of being. Therefore, we have to realize we are speaking about Dat Elyon, elevated consciousness, if you wish, elevated towards the crown. When we have the crown of life, we can know ourselves deeply. We have wisdom and understanding. And this is the healing of the third eye. If your eye is whole, your body will be full of light. But if your eye is darkened, your body will be full of darkness. This was taught by the master, the Nazarene master, Yeshua, Yeshu, whatever you want to call him. He brought this living wisdom and proved it in ways beyond limits. So he is the best example. Now, when we have the eye of wholeness, we have healing, health, and this leads us to express something in the world. Therefore, the following spheres, Chesed and Geburah, mercy and force, are connected to the so-called chakra of the throat, expression. And wisdom and understanding are the inner and outer aspect of the third eye. So mercy and force are the inner and external aspects of the expression. We have a back and forth approach to the energetic configuration. And this is very important because sometimes we can be blocked on an unconscious aspect. We can have something that we must express, but we don't know how. There is something in the back of our subconscious or unconscious, and we don't even know what it is. Many people say, I have to express something, but I don't know what it is. But I feel myself full of joy to express it, but I don't know how or what. Because they have an intuition and they have experienced maybe a flash of true love. But this must be developed. So we also need force. We need to express everything through a structure. We cannot allow the energy just to flow without control. There must be an harmonious flow for which we need conduction, discipline, discernment. Those are qualities of Geburah, the force, whose negative aspect is power. But I will leave the negative aspects for further on. We will be seeing the different traumas and neuroses associated with these spheres. Now just keep in mind the gist of it, the essence of what I'm speaking, and you can deduce many things. And also notice that those spheres are connected to the throat physically, even though they have an energetic configuration and also a soul aspect and a spirit aspect, which must be untangled. If there is a negative implant in your spirit, if you have a twisted spirit, then you cannot solve anything by speaking, repeating things, doing things, rituals, or thinking about things. You have to become fully aware of what is keeping you trapped, and then can you untangle the mess by feeling fully with mind, heart, and body. This is the essence of wholeness. This is the essence of wisdom and understanding. If you don't know and you don't understand what you are and what is keeping you in a state of misery, then forget about healing. Obviously, you can have faith and maybe be healed by the feeling of love experienced in a certain state, but in most cases, this is considered a miracle performed by some external god, or something that cannot be repeated, that is the act of someone external, when even the master, in the healings he performed, usually said, your faith has saved you, your faith healed you. He didn't say, I healed you. Some people saw him and they got healed. Some people touched him and they got healed. But it's because they were able to express something from their heart, a pure love. And this love, what brings healing. It's not praying for receiving something we don't have. The Master came to show what we are, and therefore what we have, which is fullness. And this self-awareness takes place in Tiferet, beauty, armonia, the sphere we find right in the middle, is a central sphere because it connects everything with everything else. When we feel true self-recognition, we don't feel ourselves as victims, we don't have self-pity, we don't self-deprecate, we don't criticize others or ourselves, because we love ourselves. This sphere is the harmonia of Chesed, mercy, and Gebura, force. So we have mercy for ourselves, for others. We forgive others' trespasses because we understand how one feels in weakness, because we have gone through that. But once we overcome them, then we can forgive. This is known as the Son of Man that forgives. Because the Master became human to understand what being human is. And being human means being weak in a certain way, but only when you don't recognize who you are. So, our humanity is a way of remembering ourselves, that we can go beyond limitations. Therefore, it's a process of dying and being reborn. When you are reborn, then you are not just a human being, but part of the divine being of the Messiah, the collective intelligence of life. Messiah means there is understanding. Yesh Moach is there is brain. Mashiach also means anointed because it's connected to Neshama, the breath of understanding. And this is all implicit in that self-recognition. We recognize our mercy, our force, our self-assurance, and therefore we can be completely sure about what we are doing without any doubt. And obviously this is connected to the chakra of the heart, which usually is full of negativity, self-compassion, self-pity, self-deprecation. Therefore it must be cleansed. Now, going a bit lower, we have two Sefirot more, Netzach and Or, victory and splendor of truth. And these are connected to the solar plexus. Obviously, in order to overcome, to have success, we must overcome many negative emotions, negative thoughts, but especially emotional disharmonia. And in Or, we must need honesty, the splendor of truth. These are the inner and outer aspects of the solar plexus chakra, or the energy center in the solar plexus. And there is a connection with the body as well. In the solar plexus, we not only have nerves, but also the area of the digestive system. So, if you are not conquering your emotions, your passions, you are going to have digestive issues. And notice how this is epidemic nowadays. Most people have difficulties with the digestive system, not only due to the food, but also to undigested emotions and thoughts. So we have to be honest and assume the splendor of life and light in ourselves. Going further, we find Yesod, the so-called foundation, associated with the vital energy, also sexual energy. And it's also known as the Sacrum bone chakra, because it's the area where this energy accumulates. And it's the foundation of the material world. There is a living energy in matter, which pulls us down unless we transform it into subtle garments. So, if we are fully connected to the crown, we have wisdom and understanding and self-recognition with mercy and force, then we can transform our emotions, our thoughts, and this vital energy grows. This is why we can be fully in this physical world without being dominated by it. This means realizing ourselves, fulfilling our mission. That would be the contact with Malkut, the root chakra in the physical body and energy body. And the root in the fallen Sefirot tree is a physical world, but the root in the true tree of life is the Holy Spirit, coming to reconcile the world to the Absolute. Therefore, we have to understand why there is so much conditioning. So I will try to make a summary before the light disappears completely. Realize that the problems we have here are not just the result of human mistakes, not even Adamic mistakes, because Adam was a collective being, soul, that came to this solar system to learn certain lessons, and they mix up before time with the physical world, because they thought something had to be elevated with the wisdom they had. The problem is that when they mix up with this world, they started to get incarnated into creatures that were already the result of experiments, modifications. And we know that from different sources. The first source I knew about all this was in the teachings of Mr. Gurdjieff. Later on, I discovered the same information in the Zohar and Sumerian mythology. And one of the things he said is that humanity is food for the moon. Mr. Gurdjieff even told a fascinating story. He said there was a shepherd that was very mean. He didn't want to share his sheep with anyone, and he didn't want the sheep to escape. So he decided to hypnotize the sheep so they obeyed, and he could shear them and skin them and get their flesh without effort. So he hypnotized the sheep, making them believe they were lions, eagles, that they were immortal, and even that when they were going to be sheared and skinned, that this would be good for them. So the shepherd got rid of all problems. He didn't have to worry very much about the sheep escaping. And as Gurdjieff pointed out, this is the condition of humanity. Humanity descends from animal beings that in ancient times acquired the ability to get very intelligent. They were, in my view, sort of amphibian reptilian species. And the engineers, architects, Elohim, or Yud-Heh Elohim, implanted something in this species, so they didn't wake up. And this was a problem because they somehow got asleep, but when those conditions were no longer needed, the organs of misperception that were implanted somehow had developed certain tendencies in humanity that remained. And this is the problem. We are still dealing with passions and impulses that are not ours, that somehow come back over and over because they are residual energies. And this is why in chapter 2 of the book of Genesis, it is said that Adam did not find an appropriate helpmate, and Yud-Heh Elohim, the so-called Lord God, decided to split Adam to take a rib, and in Hebrew wisdom tradition, this rib is known as Lilith, which was an additional energy that came from the previous species. So they modified those species so that the Adamic consciousness was not so dangerous. Adam was told not to touch the tree of knowledge of good and bad, but he was immature and he somehow mixed with it, in part because of the conditions imposed by the architects, which were doing something with the moon. And this is told in different myths, but the first time I heard about it was reading the book Beelzebub Tales by Gurdjieff, where he says that there was a catastrophe. A long-orbit asteroid impacted against a planet that was here. I think in Sumerian mythology this was known as Tiamat. And this obviously generated a huge upheaval, and some fragments were ejected into the space, the so-called outer space, which is not a space, actually is the so-called waters from the heavens. And one of these fragments was shaped, and eventually it became the moon. But originally, this fragment threatened the Earth because it started to fall back to the Earth because of the law of gravity, obviously. And the engineers of this system, which I think they were already fallen, they were in a duality, had to implant something on the Earth, organic life, so this life emitted certain energies that push the moon back. So they had to generate a mechanism of feeding for the moon, energetic feeding, to propel the moon outwards. And this is why the engineers also had to modify certain species so that they didn't become too intelligent, discovering why they were present on the Earth. They were serving the system of the gods, which was a dual world, a world with sun and moon. There was even a little moon known as Lilith in astrology, not by chance. And this little moon has even a more destructive influence because it's related to passional and conscious energies. Actually, in Hebrew wisdom, Lilith is the residual energy of those primeval creatures that were probably something close to what we know as sirens and tritons, beings from mythologies all over the world, and they still exist in a residual form. So they have an influence on the human psyche, and it's very important to get rid of this influence by becoming aware who we are. We are not animals, we don't descend from beings of this world when we are in the body of the Messiah. Let's say we are elevating this world, elevating the human personality, but this is different. Now the question is, were those engineers evil, as many people believe? Well, I don't think they were evil in the way we think. Some are evil. I think they were just sustaining their fallen world. They needed energies, and they established it that way. But we have to understand many more things. The Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Elohim is a collective of engineers, and not all of them are of the same species, not all of them have the same functions. Some of them are reptilian, obviously, others are not. This is why it's a mistake to say there is a sort of reptilian god known as Jehovah or Yahweh or Yahweh going through the skies, making experiments with humanity to use us as a source of food. This is a very inaccurate interpretation, and we need to expand the mind, because Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Elohim is also connected to the architects of nature in general. So, in a sense, they made many mistakes, but we should not consider they are evil, because evil is the result of this system of duality, and it includes accusation. So when we become accusers, we somehow become part of the devil. It's true that many architects have an accusing nature because they demand energies, and when we don't produce them, they somehow become dense, because they are planetary intelligences, the souls of the planets and the stars. This is something I explained in the video Musical Genesis, or Astro Musical Genesis, because the so-called Elohim, in the beginning Elohim created the heavens and the earth, are not the Divine Father. They are the architects, and they are basically the intelligences of the stars and the planets, and they generated a fallen world. As it is said in the book of Genesis, the earth came to be void and without form, tohu babohu, which is the state of chaos of the primeval world, because of certain selfish desires from beings that did not receive enough light, because there were configurations of the Sephirotic tree which were not balanced. Divine beings did not what love is, so they generated conditions of evolution that led to a catastrophe. This is why we have to understand all the cosmos in ourselves. Everything is in us. So animals, plants, minerals, even the architects are in us. Therefore, if we harmonize ourselves, we can elevate the fallen world within ourselves. And this is a condition also established by Yud Kebab Hei Elohim. Otherwise they wouldn't have said, eat from the tree of life, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This was the choice of Adam, which was somehow deceived by the conditions of Yud Kebab Hei Elohim, but this is the way nature teaches lesson. Mother Nature became stepmother Nature, but this doesn't give us the right to condemn her. We have to love with all our mind, heart, and vital soul, as the Master said, because we have to understand that a divided house cannot stand. A divided house gets eventually destroyed. Therefore, for today I think it's enough. I'm in the middle of darkness. I hope to have enough attention not to fall anywhere. And thank you very much for listening with attention. Remember, I have a blog called The Song of Reality, which I started to write in 2008 in Ireland, and I publish the videos in there as well. I have a web offering sessions of counseling and tuition modules in a course of harmony therapy. You have all the information in the box. There is also another web there you can leave some messages. You can also leave them in the blog. They will get into my email. And until the next day, let's keep cleaning the mind and the heart to manifest that infinite love, unmodified life, integral conscience, and deep, blissful serenity.